Talking about the rhetoric of the campaigns. That's where we were before we tuned in with Mike Braun. I want to talk about that. Then I want to move to the balance of power that's at stake in Congress. But the rhetoric, you use the word civil discourse very often. And I think that's really where we are. So many people have almost been alienated by the language that have been used by both campaigns, people would argue, to the point where they are disinterested almost in the topics that they're talking about. Is that a fair assessment?
When you say, and I'd say you in the broad percentage, but when you say the rhetoric has been used on both sides, what do you mean by that?
So journalistically, I have to say that.
I understand that.
I think the most recent example would be the garbage comments and the argument that Joe Biden used the term garbage against Trump supporters. I think that's probably the most recent example.
And so, and again, since we're on a streaming platform and we're kind of doing this in a little bit of a different way, we can have honest conversations.
And that's the point of it. That's the point of it,
right? So that's the part where, and I think this is where, and maybe it's me, and we can work this out. So let me sit on your couch for a minute. This is where it gets frustrating listening to it, because you can hear it say, it's almost like you're being gaslit when you hear it said, oh well, but it's happening on both sides. When you have if one side is saying it all the time, and then the other side just responds back with one, is that equal? And does that, in the minds of those who are listening to the reporting that is coming out, that gives an accurate portrayal of this is what is happening, this is kind of like what we see, and so then therefore it gives an accurate portrayal of, well, yeah, this is how it's happening, and this is kind of where discourse is more broadly in our society. That's where I think we will need to have to kind of assess that and see how that goes. I think in terms of where do we go from here and kind of moving forward, you have to get back to, again, this is we started off our conversation with the back in my day conversation. I got into politics because of people like Wendell Ford,
the last Democrat to be elected to the Senate from the
state of Kentucky. But what I learned from him was the art of politics. Politics is the art of negotiated hurt, meaning there has to be a give and take to it. When you from on both sides of an issue. So it's not I'm 100% right and Iris is 100% wrong, or vice versa, where she's going to be 100% right and I'm 100% wrong, right? If we're in a healthy relationship, then that's what happens, right? There's some give and take and there's some reflection. With Senator Ford, we would always see, and he would always say, his best friend was Bob Dole on the Senate floor. They would go walk up in the cloakroom, get ready to go into the, now what are we arguing about today? Oh, it's Social Security? Okay.
And then Bob Dole would say, I know it, you know it, and the American people know it.
Right, so then they would go back and forth, right? When they get done, come out, where we're gonna go have dinner.
Right.
Or, how's your family? And, families on vacation. It's that type of thing, right? And so I ask a lot of times when I'm listening to some of these other politicians that are out there who are like, it's my way or the highway. I don't believe in compromise. If you're compromised, you're a this or you're a that. I'd love to see their marriages, or and who are they partnered with, right? Because if that's the way it's going on in your household, I would be shocked.
Well, let me open up my couch, because you said let me sit on your couch. Come on. Because Iris, I want to bring you into this conversation, because I'll be very honest. When I interview people who are Donald Trump supporters or people from the Republican Party, I don't often get the level of civil discourse that I'm getting, as expected, from you. And what David is saying, he mentioned that politics is the art of negotiating. You referencing Senator Ford. Here we are in a state, in a political climate where Mitch McConnell rules supreme in the world of politics, and he is widely heralded as the architect of obstruction politics. And so when people make that argument to you, as a Republican strategist. How do you push back against that? How do you get to a point, or is there willingness on the Republican side to get to a point where what David is talking about can be true again?
Yeah, I think we need to kind of take a step back and kind of ask questions like, what sort of motivates this type of behavior, this type of turnout, how does this type of rhetoric exist? And sort of where I break it down into is, political creatures. I know that's not probably a nice way to put it, but essentially, elected officials, political creatures are motivated by re-election. And so when you look at the electorate, they are empowered to essentially vote you in or vote you out. And so, I think there's a lot more conversations of, sort of chicken or the egg of, voters are making decisions to elevate certain people in positions of power into elected office, and what type of tone and messaging and what are the key takeaways that motivates them to vote for a certain candidate. And so we bring up compromise. I think it's sort of accelerated in recent years, but compromise is a very dirty word. Whether you're looking at it, at City Council here in Frankfurt, and then into Congress. And so, I think America generally, we've gotten away from that. It is more of that give and take. And so I think until voters sort of embrace more of that, I think voters across the spectrum will get different results. I think the pressure will be on elected officials to change behavior and to have more of a willingness to work with others that have different ideas. But right now, I think everyone's stuck in their echo chamber. And it seems that sort of fuel to this fire is, well, we don't like the rhetoric, but the rhetoric continues to empower people to make certain types of choices at the ballot box. So how do we break that cycle, I think is the question.
Yeah, I think Iris made a great point there in that there's 2 points to it. One is you have to have, as an elected official, you have to have the courage. I always harken back to John F. Kennedy's book, Profiles in Courage, right? Where there were those elected officials who had the courage to say, yes, I'm hearing what maybe the broader public is saying, but in this moment, it does not I have to go against what my constituency or what the broader public is saying because it's not the right thing to do. There are times when that courage has to be displayed from the elected official part. At the same time, those elected officials who do reach across the aisle and try to work with other people and try to bring people together have to be rewarded for that type of effort. And that then falls on the electorate to be able to do that. Because a lot of times, if I reach across and I get, my hand smacked, I'm not going to be reaching across, many more times because that's what's happened.
And I'll give you an example. So I was affiliated with a national sort of pro-business organization that saw a major gap to fill. As the sort of the quote unquote business community, they've been able to demonstrate having effective relationship on both sides of the aisle, right? In order to get stuff done, depending on whatever level of government. So they made the case saying it is good for business when we have bipartisanship. And so they made a strategic decision, this association, to essentially create a political organization that would reward people, that essentially would put money in races and elevate elected officials that demonstrated their willingness for bipartisanship. That quickly did not take off because people were scared to put money behind that, saying like, so essentially we're trying to reinforce that people need to maybe rethink their values or compromise on core values or just something that was really not the point. And so the fact that we do need to kind of reshape how we think of our candidates and how we reward them for certain behavior, like all of that needs to be reimagined, but it's sort of feeding this endless cycle.
And so this is a very forward-moving conversation. The unfortunate part of it is the other side that we know to be true historically is what we've learned from countries that have strong leaders or dictators or semi-presidential republics. The best way to unite people is to give them something to hate. That's what's been true over the course of history.
It's a little bit of science, right? I think fear sells, right? I think we've maybe talked about that earlier in the night. And so, back in my campaign days, I think the reason that, it would be common, right? Like, oh, Iris, like I'm so frustrated about the negative ads and the attack ads. They're effective. They're effective. And so, when you sort of break down sort of the human condition of like what compels you, are you be like, happy, excited to pull the lever for a candidate? Are you absolutely scared because of the contrast? And so it's a little bit of that science.
But we've seen where where there's, yeah, you're right. Fear works, but also hope is a strong motivator as well, right? So that is why you had a Barack Obama in 8 and 12, because it was the power of hope. It was about a movement, and you're surrounding that, and that's what propelled you forward. We got the civil rights movement not because of fear and intimidation, but because of a movement that was built. I think a movement and hope is harder than fear to be able to replicate and to continue to reproduce over and over again, right? And so, but that's the challenge. But at the same time, I think that's the struggle and that's the challenge that we have. The other part of this too is it is also difficult in a democracy when the more people and the more disparate voices that come to the table, it's harder for that democracy to continue to thrive and to grow, right? When we look at the kind of like the creation of our country, right? This conversation with these people sitting at this table would not be happening back then.
Right.
And that's and so you can argue that the framers didn't see it that way. Yet the Constitution that was written and our governing were written in such a way, some may argue because of divine intervention, to where that it would grow with the country as we are evolving and things like that. So, I would say to people, don't be discouraged, by things. You got to stay in the fight. You got to keep on growing. You got to keep on evolving, because that's just life. That's just who we are as individuals and as human beings.
Yeah.